Thank you very much. And hi, everyone. Uh, Welcome to the first webinar in the MTW Flexibility 2 onboarding series. Let me take a minute to just congratulate you on being selected as the final 14 MTW agencies that will participate in these cohort studying MTW flexibility overall. The whole MTW team is delighted to have everyone here. On behalf of HUD and the MTW team, we really want to welcome you to the MTW family. My name is John Kincannon. I'm the director of the Moving to Work office. Over the course of today's session, you'll be hearing from lots of members of the MTW team. We're excited to have you as partners and work with you along the way. We're also excited about the flexibility that is being provided to all of you, because we'll look to you to learn about the policies that you're implementing and learn from them to see how then we can roll those out to other PHAs nationwide, see what's working, see what isn't. So we're really excited. Now we know that having MTW status, for some agencies, it creates almost an existential crisis because some of the guardrails are pulled off. I often think of an MTW executive director having had his MTW designation for several years, saying MTW allowed the agency to rethink three things. They rethought how they were able to serve their residents, rethought how they were able to serve their communities, and they rethought how they were able to operate as a housing authority. So I know that's a lot. We have a full onboarding series to walk you through the steps of what it means to be MTW and how to use your flexibility, your waivers and funding. But just want to say, take it all in. We'll have plenty of opportunities for questions and technical assistance, and you name it. So we just really want to welcome you all here today. I know it's been a long road and some of you have been trying to get in for a little while. So we're really excited. Now I'm going to turn it over to Andalyn Nesbitt Rodriguez with ICF, who's going to serve as our MC for today's session.
All right, thank you so much, John. And hello, everyone. As John stated, my name is Andalyn Nesbitt Rodriguez. I'm with ICF. We're a contractor that supports the MTW work at HUD, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. In this introductory webinar, we're going to begin by introducing some of our HUD staff. You'll hear from some people today that you'll be hearing from throughout the course of the onboarding series. So we want to make those introductions now and hope that you'll start to get familiar with those folks. Then we're going to watch a brief video, it's about 2 minutes long, where we're going to hear from some other MTW expansion PHAs about their experiences with the MTW expansion program. After that, we're going to break it out into smaller groups so that you can get to know some of the people representing your other cohort agencies. In that breakout session, we're going to discuss why you wanted to become an MTW agency and what you're hoping to accomplish. After the breakout session, we're going to come back into this main room and review the 6 steps that you're going to need to complete as you begin to implement your MTW program. We'll get into some good detail on step 1, the MTW ACC amendment execution process, which is really the first step that you're going to need to understand right up front. Then we're going to go through the remaining steps 2 through 6. So it's a lot of information. We're going to try to give you a great overview of steps 2 through 6 so that you'll have a sense of what's coming down the road. And we'll get into more detail around each of those elements in subsequent webinars. As Sean stated earlier, we're going to have a chance to ask questions and wrap up at the end. And during that final question and answer portion, you're going to be able to unmute yourselves and ask questions verbally, or you can ask questions in the chat box. We invite you to ask questions throughout the session in the chat box. We're going to try to answer a few questions at the end of each step in the process. So go ahead and feel free to put any questions that you have along the way into the chat box. All right, next slide. So now let's take a moment to introduce the HUD staff who will be presenting on the call and who you'll be working with as you implement the MTW expansion flexibilities. I'm going to ask each of them to to come on camera if they can, so you can put a face to the name. You've already heard from MTW's Office Director, John Concannon. We also have Deputy Director of the MTW office, Allison Christensen, with us today. We have financial analyst Philip Pless as well. And last but not least, Autumn Gold, a housing innovation specialist, is with us today. So thank you all. Okay, next slide. All right. So with that, we want to share with you some of the excitement that MTW has created with PHAs across the country. It's really a wonderful program with so much to offer. So let's take a moment to view this quick video to see what some of your colleagues from other MTW agencies have to say about the benefits of being an MTW agency. We're excited to have you all joining us, and we hope that you all are just as excited. Our host is going to keep everyone muted from his end at this time to ensure there's no audio feedback while we play the video. And then after the video, the host will restore your ability to mute and unmute yourselves. With that, we can play the video.
Oh, MTW is amazing. It is the best thing since sliced bread. Seriously. It is the thing that gets me up in the morning. It is the thing that gets me to work. I am so passionate about it. It is absolutely, truly amazing. We are creative. We get to think outside the box. We get to respond to local community needs, what our people need, not what HUD or people in Washington think people in Boulder, Colorado need. We get to respond and work with our local partners. We get to create what our residents and participants need. You know, we talk to them, we hear from them, we get what they need and can really help them move forward. That in and of itself is amazing.
It has been absolutely life-changing in terms of our organization and what we were able to do and what we've been able to do as an MTW. And when I look around at my colleagues, even just up the road in other cities right within Connecticut, we can really see the difference that the MTW flexibility has provided. We went into this with a plan to really redevelop our portfolio and to really invest in our residents and then figure out ways that we could streamline our activities. And there are so many examples of how we can see that has changed in dramatic ways for our residents, for our city, the impact on our city, and also spirit up for our employees. It's brought a real innovation spirit or entrepreneurial spirit to the work we do, which makes us feel not like a big public bureaucracy, but more like an innovation lab, as Moving to Work likes to sort of call the program.
MTW is a true gift. It is the flexibility that housing authorities need, if I could go as far to say, to survive going forward. It allows you to address local issues. It allows you to customize a program that works for you, your families, and your community.
All right. Next slide, please. But as you can see, lots of excitement about MTW from others who have had the opportunity to experience the program and have been able to really dig in and see the benefits. And we hope that you all will be the ones who are the subject of those kinds of very exciting interviews in a few years. So again, welcome to MTW. This slide shows each of the 14 PHAs in this cohort. You should feel free to get to know each other through the onboarding series. You may even find it helpful to call each other for advice, brainstorming, or just for moral support and encouragement along the journey. All right, next slide. So that you can get to know each other better, we're going to go ahead and break out into smaller groups for some discussion. Your agency is going to be placed into a group with other agencies kind of in your regions across the country so that you can meet folks from the agencies that are relatively close to you. A member of the HUD staff will facilitate each breakout room. And this slide kind of shows how you're divided. I'll give you a minute to take a look. We're going to kind of push you into rooms so you don't have to worry about choosing which room you're going to go into. We have Tanisha Gurdon with the HUD MTW office who's going to be facilitating the red room. Eva Fontime with the HUD MTW office will be facilitating the yellow group. And Autumn Gold, who you met earlier during introductions, will facilitate the green group. So that we can get to know each other a little better, please plan to turn on your video once you're in the breakout room, and don't be shy. Next slide. All right. So before we dive into the steps, we're going to do our breakout session. In a moment, you're going to receive a pop-up window that's going to ask you to click the join button, or join now button. Click that button to go ahead and enter your breakout room. Once we break out, HUD staff will introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of go around the room to hear from each agency. So in the interest of time, please have one person from your agency kind of lead that introduction for your agency. We'll be in these breakout rooms for about 20 minutes. At the 20-minute mark, you'll automatically be moved into the breakout room. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sean for more instructions about navigating to that room. All right. I hope everybody had a really great breakout session. Welcome back. Again, the intent of that breakout session was to really begin getting familiar with your other MTW expansion colleagues and with HUD staff. We hope that you'll lean on each other and serve as resources for one another when needed, leading up to and through implementation of your MTW activities. So now I'm going to turn it over to Allison Christensen to begin guiding you through the steps from selection to implementation. Allison?
Awesome. Thank you, Andolyn. I hope everybody had a great time in their breakout rooms getting to know your new colleagues and partners in this MTW journey. You'll be seeing a lot of each other over the next several months on these webinars, and hopefully getting to know each other more one-on-one to talk through different MTW strategies and policies that might work for your local communities. So great to have you here, and we are all very excited for you. As it has been said a couple times, and you'll probably hear even more, and becoming an MTW agency does come with a certain amount of a transition period. So there are some steps that you'll need to take in order to make that transition. But we'll be here with you. Your field office will be here with you to help you make all those changes. So what we're really going to focus on in detail today is this first step, the completing and executing of the MTW ACC amendment. That's, as you can see, the first step and the one that you'll want to get started on, relatively soon as your agency is ready. So we're going to go into many details on how to get that started today. And then in subsequent webinars, we'll get into these steps 2 through 6. So 2 is preparing your agency's MTW finances. As you know, MTW gives you funding flexibility between your voucher and public housing funds. So we'll give you more information on how that works. Really encourage you to engage your finance and accounting teams in these conversations because they tend to get pretty technical. So be prepared for that webinar when it comes up. Third, conducting public process and complete development of the MTW supplement. The MTW supplement is what you're going to be submitting now with your PHA plan. It gives a detailed list of the activities and waivers that you'll be utilizing under MTW. So it's really your key to your MTW local program and how you communicate to HUD and to your community what flexibilities you'll be using. Step number 4 is submitting that MTW supplement to the PHA plan. Again, the MTW supplement and the PHA plan go together, so you'll be submitting both at the same time. So you'll get information on how to actually the logistics of submitting those documents. Number 5, receiving approval of the MTW supplement from the HUD field office. As you'll hear a lot today too, and in subsequent webinars, your HUD field office contact is going to be your first stop for information. You're going to continue to engage with them on all of your needs, including those related to MTW. And they will loop in the MTW desk officer who sits at headquarters or in some of the regional offices. We do have outstationed employees in our office to help for any kind of more technical questions that the field office needs assistance on. But you'll be getting those approvals and working directly through your field office on these documents. And then finally, step number 6, which is kind of a larger question mark, is transitioning your MTW expansion 5/8, your forms to the new Housing Information Portal, HIP, which is kind of another side issue of a big transition that's going on throughout all of HUD and PIH right now. So you can see that's the last step, and we hope everything is settled and able to give you some good information on that as your last step. So with that, I will turn it over to Philip Pless, who will begin to get into all of the nitty-gritty details on the ACC amendment.
Oh, hello everyone again. Thank you for being with us today. We're just really so pleased that we have 14 new agencies to bring on board. And so today I'm here with you all to walk you through the MTW ACC amendment execution process. So you guys have probably already heard from me once or twice through the MTW flexibility email inbox. So as I was telling folks in our breakout session, anytime when you guys are ready to submit your MTW ACC amendment to that mailbox, you'll be corresponding with me and I'll be working with you guys to get processed. So let's get started talking about this process. So the first step in our process to officially becoming MTW is to complete the MTW ACC amendment. So the MTW ACC amendment basically is a document that sets forth the terms of participation and includes all requirements and covenants to be followed regarding your participation in the MTW program. It must be signed and executed by both our PHA and by HUD before you can use funding flexibility. And so when you are completing this process and getting ready to execute it, once you have submitted it, and we have a couple who have already submitted so far, but you will email the PDF copy of the MTW ACC amendment and your board resolution authorizing your executive director to execute the MTW ACC amendment to this email inbox here, mtwflexibility2@hud.gov. And as you can see in this box at the very bottom of the page, this is the hyperlink that goes directly to the MTW ACC amendment. So next slide, please. So now we're going to talk through the sections of the MTW ACC amendment, and we're going to start by talking about sections 1 through 4. This is where we get into the really kind of into the weeds. And I will say, as you are taking a look at this document for the first time, it is a lot of legalese. So just take that into account. But what we're going to do is we're just going to really quickly talk through the different sections and basically give you an idea of what each of these sections means in layman's terms, okay? So first of all, let's talk about section 1. So section 1, in that section, it's basically just saying that you're entering into an amendment to your annual contributions contract between HUD and the PHA. So that's where you'll specify, and there'll be a line there for you to enter your PHA name. Section 2 of the document is just saying that the ACC, this amendment to the ACC or the annual contributions contract, because we at HUD love our acronyms, applies to any ACC in effect for both public housing and the HCV program. Okay, so this is a document essentially amends the ACC for both public housing for both Section 9 and Section 8. Okay, Section 3 of the document is basically going into some detail saying that essentially stating that your ACC is being amended in designation as your MTW, your designation as an MTW agency as per the law that authorized the demonstration, which is the 2016 Appropriations Act. And it also states that you guys are, this is probably the first time you've heard this today, but you will hear this document referenced a lot, is the MTW Operations Notice. The MTW Operations Notice is a very important document that we will go into a lot of detail about. But this is just saying that your terms and conditions of participation are governed by that document. And then this final section here in section 4 is essentially just stating that the initial term of participation is going to be 20 years from the beginning of your agency's first full fiscal year following MTW ACC amendment execution. Next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about section 5, which is an important section for you just to keep into consideration as you start to undertake and plan for your MTW activities. This is the requirements and covenants section, and this basically lays out all of the things that the PHA is expected to deliver as part of their participation in the MTW demonstration. So the first one is that you will operate your agency's MTW program in accordance with the MTW operations notice. We will talk about this document a lot, as I had just mentioned. The next requirement is that you will cooperate with HUD and specifically with the policy development and research part of HUD, which is known as PD&R, and any of their contractors that are working on the HUD-sponsored evaluation of Cohort. Of the Cohort specific study, you guys are looking at MTW in terms of how it affects MTW flexibilities or administrative flexibility. So you're expected to work with the contractor and participate in full faith with them. And this last part is just saying that you are only exempted from provisions of the Housing Act of 1937 as specified in the operations notice. What this essentially means is that the MTW designation basically is focused on the Housing Act of 1937, and that a lot of other cross-cutting, what we call cross-cutting federal requirements, things such as environmental review, 2 CFR Part 200, Davis-Bacon, affirmatively furthering fair housing, excuse me, all of those requirements still apply for MTW PHAs, okay? So that's what that section is essentially saying. Next slide, please. Okay, so this part of the ACC amendment is essentially covering what happens if you decide that you want to leave MTW early, okay? So this section talks about the requirements for submitting a transition plan. And so you'll need, if you decide to leave, or this is just as the initial 20-year term is expiring, you will need to submit your plan at least 1 year prior to your ACC amendment expiration. That transition plan should describe your plans for phasing out MTW activities, a proposed duration for that transition, and a justification for any extensions you might be requesting. And once that transition plan is submitted to HUD, HUD has 75 days to review and respond, or it's deemed approved otherwise. And this was added based on public feedback during the development of this process. Next slide. Okay, so this is the part that we, that none of us like to talk about, but it's an important thing just for you to be aware of. This is discussing termination and default. So if the PHA violates any of the terms and conditions of this ACC, of their annual contributions contract, or this amendment, or the operations notice, HUD may undertake any or all of these remedial abilities available by law, including but not limited to requiring additional reporting on deficient areas, requiring the PHA to prepare a HUD-approved schedule of actions or management plan for properly completing activities, suspend MTW waiver authorization for affected violations, require reimbursement for amounts used in violation of the MTW ACC amendment, terminate the MTW ACC amendment and require the agency to transition out of MTW, restrict your ability to use funding flexibility, or take other corrective or remedial action legally available. Next slide. All right, Section 8 and 9 essentially addresses future laws that the Congress may pass. Section 8 basically states that any future laws that conflict with any provision of this MTW ACC amendment supersede it. And Section 9 is essentially saying any invalid clause shall be stricken while remainder of your agreement continues to be in full effect. So this is just addressing future laws or requirements that the Congress might impose upon HUD or the housing authorities. And this is just essentially, HUD, in this section is HUD's planning of how to deal with those future laws that we don't know about, obviously. And I believe that's the end of our slide section for the MTW ACC amendment. And I'm going to pass it to Angela to see if we have any questions that may have come in through the chat while I was speaking.
Yeah, thank you so much. We do have a question that came in through the chat. Does the ACC amendment process differ for HCV only PHAs?
Great question. No, it does not. So the MTW ACC amendment, as I had mentioned, I think in one of the first slides, the MTW ACC amendment actually amends the ACC for both the HCV program and the public housing program. So the ACC amendment execution process is going to be exactly the same for both public housing only agencies, HCV only agencies, and programs with a combined public housing and HCV program.
Thank you so much. That was the only question in chat at this time. So thank you so much for entering that question. I'm going to encourage everybody again, put your questions into the chat because we're going to be stopping periodically to get those questions and get them answered for you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Philip now to continue.
Okay, so we talked about the nitty-gritty details of the MTW ACC amendment. So let's now talk about the actual execution process and how this works, okay? So this little process flow chart here really outlines the steps that you guys need to take in order to get your ACC amendment executed, officially become an MTW agency. So the first step is you want to review this with the board. And this is really regarding about transparency and giving the executive director permission to sign your MTW document versus requiring your board action every time. So your next step in the process is going to be you want to submit you want to get your board approval. And when you are executing or signing the MTW ACC amendment, the executive director, you will also want to include the board resolution. And then when you do that, you will send that executed PDF to HUD. And we have the email box here where those all go. That's MTW flexibility 2, and that's there's no spaces in between those at hud.gov. What we will then do, and just a really quick note about the ACC amendment when you sign, you can either digitally sign the ACC amendment or you can handwrite it. Both are permissible and acceptable. That was an important step I had missed for that step. So once it comes to HUD, I will then review all of your submissions just to check for completeness, that you filled out the ACC amendment properly, that you signed the ACC amendment, dated it, and that you also submitted the board resolution. And then what we do is about once a month, we package all of the ACC amendments. We process these in cycles. We package them together, and then they go forward to the PIH front office senior leadership, and it will then be signed and dated or executed, or what we call countersigned, by HUD's principal deputy assistant secretary, Mr. Richard Monacchio. And then once he signs it, you're fully executed. We will get those copies back from the PIH front office, and then we will email you a copy of your final executed ACC amendment. And then at that point, you are officially MTW. Next slide. This is just another, this slide here just gives you guys an idea of what the PHA signature line execution looks like. So in that first line, you're going to want to put the signature, either digital or handwritten, of the person that's authorized to sign as stated in your board resolution. So it's either the chair, the executive director, etc. Then you're going to put the signing individual's name. You want to print it. And then you want to put the signing individual's title, also printed, and then the date of the signature. And then that bottom section there, that's the part where Mr. Monacchio will he will execute that part once we send those forward for processing. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about the board resolution. So you want to submit your board resolution with your signed MTW ACC amendment. And here on the screen, you can see a slide of example of a sample board resolution. we have, I believe, either in the helpful resources document that we sent out, or we will follow up if we did not. We will send out a link to this sample board resolution that you can use. It's a Word document that you can use at your discretion. That using this template is optional, but you must submit your board resolution with your MTW ACC amendment in order for us to move it forward for processing. Next slide. Okay, and I believe with that slide, we have completed our review or our sort of process for executing your ACC amendment. And I'm going to turn it back to Andelin to see if we have received any questions about anything related to the MTW ACC amendment process.
Not at this time. No other questions have come in through the chat. I want to give folks just a minute if anyone wants to unmute themselves and maybe ask a question verbally. Right. Well, it sounds like no questions at this time. So we are going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. So folks can move around a little bit, get some water. We will meet back here at, let's see, 3:06 Eastern time. So we'll go ahead and break now for 10 minutes. Thank you, everybody. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I hope everybody had a good break. So we're going to continue chugging along here. We've covered the first step in this 6-step process at this point. So that's the MTW ACC amendment execution. And that, of course, has to happen first. Now we're going to give you a brief overview of what's to come next after that. Don't worry about doing all of these steps 2 through 6 now. This is just a preview of what is ahead. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Philip for a little bit more information.
Okay, so welcome back from break. So we're going to talk about step 2 in the process on your road and journey of becoming an MTW at agency. So now we're going to talk about funding flexibility, which is probably the thing that everyone associates with MTW. So funding flexibility refers to your ability to use both your Section 8 and Section 9, i.e. Your HCV, and that includes HAP and your HCV admin fees, as well as capital funds and operating funds flexibly. That is available to you on the same day that HUD countersigns the MTW ACC amendment. So that date may vary for all of our agencies, depending on when you submit your MTW ACC amendment. Another step that you may want to take prior to our finance webinar series that we'll introduce here in just a second is there are several resources available to you all regarding how your HCV renewal funding is going to be calculated, as well as public housing. We recorded a webinar back in October of 2020 that goes over how the HCV renewal calculation will done. A little spoiler alert, your operating and capital fund calculations, the way that those are currently calculated under both 990 and the capital fund formula, those will not be changing whatsoever as when you become an MTW agency. Your HCV administrative fees will also be calculated the same way. They will be earned based on your leasing. It's just that the HAP, or your housing assistance payments portion of that formula, that will be changing to take into account MTW flexibility. We also have Section 5 of the MTW operations notice that will go over this section here. So you see we have the link to the operations notice. I would strongly familiarize yourself, have this document bookmarked on your computer. If you're more of a paper person, or you like having soft copies of things, or hard copies of things, I would also recommend printing this out. This is a document that you will want to refer to often, all the time when you're an MTW agency, but in particular when you're starting up, because there's just a lot of great information in there and things to think about to help you get started around requirements and just think considerations. We also have our MTW online training manual, which is kind of a step-by-step that goes through some of the information in the operations notice in sort of a more of an interactive bite-sized chunks. There's quizzes and things like that. So that section there will also have some information about funding calculations, as well as just other things around funding flexibility and reporting. So just a couple of things that you may just want to start thinking about before we have our we have a two-part funding flexibility or finance training coming up for all of you guys here in next month, but you will also want to consider any potential changes to financial policies and procedures. In our part 2 webinar, you guys will be able to hear, I believe, from an initial agency who will our initial 39 agencies that have been around with some of us since the very, very beginning of MTW back in the 90s. You'll be able to hear from them and things that they took into consideration when they first became MTW. Just as I had stated during the ACC amendment portion of the training, you will still need to adhere to 2 CFR Part 200. That is any agency that receives federal funds in any manner is bound by those requirements, and that's no different once you become an MTW agency. And the last part of this is around MTW reporting differences. So this is a great segue to my promotion for the 2-part finance series that we have coming up. The first session is going to be on May 9th from 2 to 4 p.m. So I would highly encourage you all to forward the meeting invitations to your finance staff, anyone working on things such as VMS, financial data schedule, any of those systems. Definitely have those folks at that first webinar in particular. And that's going to be on May 9th from 2 to 4. And then we will also have a follow-up session on May 30th from 2 to 4 Eastern that will cover sort of more higher level things around financial policies and procedures. So we definitely encourage you all to be there. And I believe now I'm going to pass it over to Andelin for the next step in the process to introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just another kind of question check. No questions in the chat right now. I'm going to continue to kind of bring this up because really want you to feel comfortable to ask any questions that you have in the chat. So we'll keep stopping for questions. But at this time, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Autumn, who's going to give us some information on conducting the public process and completing development of that MTW supplement. Autumn?
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the public process and the development of the supplement. I'll just say from experience working at a housing authority and being responsible for the PHA plan, I know that PHAs put their notice in the paper and they say they're going to have their public meeting at this time, and maybe nobody shows up, maybe a couple of people show up. But in regards to MTW, you really need to engage with your stakeholders. And if you don't already have a resident advisory board, please get one together before you are ready to go through the public process. So when conducting the public process, you need to follow the PHA plan public process requirements. The public process really is an effective tool to engage with your local community and a way to receive feedback regarding your proposed activities. The MTW supplement is designed to inform HUD, your families, members of your community, the public, your stakeholders, your nonprofits, about the activities that you seek to implement in that fiscal year. It collects information regarding each of the MTW waivers and associated activities that are made possible through the MTW operations notice. And you should bookmark the MTW operations notice and get to know it very well. Helpful hint. The process really involves holding public hearings regarding the PHA plan and the supplement, discussing potential MTW activities with program participants, and gaining feedback, and then finalizing your MTW program ideas. Please remember that in addition to the public process, you should engage your resident advisory committee and your tenant associations early and often. Keep them involved in this because it's really going to affect them, the decisions that you make and the activities that you put, and you want to hear what they need and what problems you need to solve for you, not only for the PHA, but for your families. Prior to submitting the PHA plan and the supplement, you may need to conduct up to 2 required public meetings as outlined in the operations notice. You do one public process for the PHA plan and the MTW supplement. But if you're submitting a safe harbor waiver or an agency specific waiver, you may need to follow the PHA public process requirements again and hold a second public meeting specifically to discuss those special waivers. And when I mean special waivers, I mean those waivers that are outside of, that are already allowed, they're outside of what's already allowed in the operations notice. Upon receiving comments, in consultation with the resident advisory board, really take your time to consider their feedback and potentially even modify your plans based on what they had to say. I really want to stress that this should be a collaborative process in your with your community. And upon receiving feedback from the public, take time to consider them, potentially modify your plans and make any additional efforts to make that might come because of the public input that you received. And finally, comments must be submitted as an attachment along with the description of how you responded to those comments when submitting your supplement. Andalyn, do we have any questions?
None at this time. So we will keep plugging along. I'm going to turn it back over to Philip now for a little bit more information around steps 4 and 5.
Oh, I think I'm still doing 4 and 5.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Okay, so steps 4 and 5, submitting the MTW supplement and receiving HUD approval. And that's what we all want, right? Is approval of your MTW supplement so you can start implementing these activities and really see the benefits from being an MTW agency. So remember that the PHA plan and the supplement belong together, as Allison mentioned in the beginning of this session. The information must be provided in the context of the agency's participation in the MTW demonstration and must be referenced in the PHA plan. You must submit the PHA plan and the supplement at the same time. Even though the PHA plan and the supplement are submitted in 2 different places, they really are married and are coupled together. So PHAs will continue to submit the PHA plan through the portal, and the MTW supplement and all the supporting documents must be submitted via the HIP system as part of your next regularly scheduled PHA plan submission, and then continue with the same fiscal year cycle. Qualified agencies, even though you don't have to do an annual plan every year, you must submit an annual supplement every year. After HUD reviews the supplement and possibly any associated safe harbor or agency specific waivers, you'll receive an approval letter from your field office. Be sure to follow the instructions from the field office and the MTW office, either via email or the official letter, prior to implementing any of your activities. So there will be a couple more webinars that will go a deeper dive into these issues. Please forward these opportunities to any staff that will be responsible for the development of your PHA plan and your MTW supplement. On June 27th, the MTW supplement to the PHA plan, MTW waivers, and even more on public process. We can't emphasize enough really engaging your community and your stakeholders in the public process. And then 2, on July 25th, how to submit your first MTW supplement. And with that, Andelin, I will see if we have any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. We actually do have a question in the chat. So the question is, if our PHA plan and MTW supplement are due to HUD October 18th for the 2025 year, should we be proposing to start our MTW activities for January 1st, 2025, or should we pick a later date in 2025 or even 2026 to allow HUD time to approve our MTW activities?
My recommendation is to submit it at your next annual fiscal year cycle, so October 18th. The initial review, we will approve your MTW activities that are included in Appendix 1 of the MTW operations notice. If you happen to have a safe harbor or agency specific waiver, we will conditionally approve your PHA plan and your MTW waivers and follow up with the further determination on your special waivers. But really, I would say, do it when you're ready. I mean, if you're ready this next round, please do it. If you feel like you need more time, you may want to ask for an extension, and you would do that through your field office.
Thank you. We actually have someone with their hand raised. Sarah, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry, it was maybe too challenging to type this out. I'm trying to understand the relationship between the amendment and the MTW plan, because we are a 7/1 fiscal year, so we've, it's too late to do an MTW supplement for this year. My initial thought was perhaps we should wait to submit our amendment to align with the supplement for next fiscal year. However, is the funding flexibility, does that go into effect with the amendment? Should we go ahead and submit the amendment now and then just plan for the supplement to go into effect next July?
That's a really good question. So first step is to execute your ACC amendment before you do anything. And then if you feel ready to submit your, well, let me back up. At the time that you execute your ACC amendment, you have full fungibility of your funding. However, you cannot implement any of your MTW activities until you have an approved MTW supplement.
Okay, and then the funding fungibility would not, does language around that need to go into the supplement?
If you have like any special plans for your fungibility, any of your activities, it would be included in the narrative. I'd have to know more specifics of what you're thinking.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Autumn. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Philip.
Okay, so next slide, please. All right, so now
I'm
we're
sorry,
going to
Philip.
talk.
I had a question too before no one saw my hand raised. Sorry.
Okay, go for it.
Can you speak to like the big elephant in the room? I think is all the HOTMA provisions are also due to start 1/1/25. So now that we're MTW, can you speak to should we still be dealing with HOTMA if we think we're not going to be ready for 1/1 for MTW, or is there a thought process on that, or is we done with most of HOTMA now because we're MTW? I just wasn't clear on that.
You're not done with HOTMA. What I do know is that there'll be future guidance coming out around HOTMA and how it interacts with MTW. And we are trying to get that out to all the MTW agencies sooner than later. But because it's so layered and so many issues, I can't speak directly to it right now.
Autumn? We
Okay,
actually
thank
have
you.
Ann Becker online, who is our HOTMA expert in the MTW office, and I see that her hand is raised. So Ann, do you want to respond to that at all?
Yeah, I did just want to piggyback on what Autumn said, that our office is working on, I don't know if it'll be called a frequently asked questions because, you know, whatever, but there will be something coming out where we've done sort of a cross analysis where the initial 39 versus the expansion agencies, sort of where your flexibilities intersect with HOTMA. Um, but for all intents and purposes, the sections 102, 103, 104 all apply to all MTW agencies unless you've already had an approved MTW activity in place that has been approved, and since you guys are not MTW yet, I would just be preparing for HOTMA, and then, thinking about what you might change, and knowing that the big elephant in that room is that folks want to be able to potentially waive the $100,000 and the real property um, eligibility sort of threshold that's new under HOTMA, and that's not waivable. So if you're thinking about that one, I just want to say that one is not waivable as far as we understand right now, particularly for expansions. But there will be guidance coming in. Right now, it is in the process of being looked at by the lawyers before it comes out.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Anne. All right, Philip.
Okay, well, this is another probably elephant in the room, and that's around the transition of MTW expansion 5.8 form data and just the housing information portal transition overall. So we just have some very general high level guidance here today, and that's that expansion MTW agencies will be reporting using the HUD 50058 MTW expansion form in the new housing information portal system. In particular, those MTW flexibilities that are impacting households. Otherwise, you'll continue to use the HUD 5.8 for other households. There will also be migrating tenant and public housing building and unit data, if applicable, if you have a public housing program, to the housing information portal. And this is the biggest point I want to emphasize today, is that additional guidance will be coming from HUD. There will be an implementation notice that's going to be available to all PHAs shortly. And there will be some guidance in there specific to MTW PHAs included in that document. So definitely be on the lookout for that. That should be coming at some point in the very, very, very near future. But then lastly, we'll have a webinar tentatively scheduled for September 19th, 2024 from 2 to 4 that will discuss the HUD 50058 MTW expansion form changes. So definitely be on the lookout for that later this year. And I believe I'm turning it back over to ICF to see if we have any questions.
Yeah, no questions at the moment. I don't see any hands raised either. So we will go ahead and turn it over to Allison next.
Sure, and I will have just a few slides here to wrap us up. You'll see that the number of the steps has been taken off, so steps 1 through 6, stick with that, but we have just a couple other little things to think about as you're transitioning to becoming an MTW agency. And the first is research. So research is a very important element of the MTW program. You've heard it referred to as the Affordable Housing Innovation Lab. We really like to take the things that are learned by MTW agencies and try to apply those more broadly to other PHAs. So research is a really key element, especially of the expansion. So the research topic of your cohort is MTW just has a flexibility generally. It mirrors the research that was done similarly in our first cohort for the small agencies. And here we're really just looking at how a small agency takes MTW and how it uses it. What are your intentions for using your flexibility, and how do you actually use it? And with this cohort, we're kind of trying to hone in, especially on administrative flexibilities and how you're using MTW to streamline your programs and operations. So that is going to be the subject of what we're looking to learn from you all. We understand that, you guys have so much on your plates, you're small agencies, and you don't have most likely a lot of time to dedicate to, comprehensive third-party research, and we appreciate that. So we don't have a specific evaluation contract set up yet. It's likely that it will be something that's going to be very simple and not burdensome at all to the agencies. So your interaction would be, possibly having an interview with a research team to say, hey, what were you looking to accomplish through MTW, and how do you think you got that done? So just very informal conversations. Most of the information we would opt to pull from HUD systems. So reporting that you're already doing. So we would make it as least burdensome for you as possible. So that's why on this slide, you'll see just the as necessary parts. So it would be minimal impact on the agency. We don't want to burden the agencies at all. We will look to data that you already provide to us, and likely your participation in that would just be, a casual conversation with someone down the road. Potentially talking about your MTW flexibilities or how you have streamlined your programs through MTW. So that is the research component for this cohort. The other element on this slide is the training of PHA staff. So as you go through the 6 steps, you want to make sure to bring the staff at your agency along on this journey with you. So try not to silo your MTW program employees in one place. Really have it go throughout your entire agency. You're going to want your PHA staff to know about MTW activities and how that might impact their work, and also on any hardship policies that your residents and families might be accessing, so that they know how to administer those hardship policies and make households aware of those. Next slide. Here we have for you just an illustration of a potential timeline and steps. So you'll get the slides as a part of this presentation. So feel free to kind of sit down with these and think through them. You'll notice that no matter when you start or how long the process takes, the steps are the steps. So you'll no matter what, you'll stick with steps 1 through 6 in that order. But there is a different speed at which agencies accomplish that. So you can see, we have PHAA on this chart, who's very aggressive and wants to get started as soon as possible. They're getting their ACC executed as soon as possible and getting their finances in line, and want to be, fully up and ready as soon as possible. And then you have PHAs B and C, who are taking a little more time, which we recommend often in a lot of cases. We think it's very prudent for PHAs to really think through these steps of getting your finances settled, really thinking through what you want to use your MTW flexibility to do, engaging your stakeholders, engaging your staff, and really sitting down to think through the activities that you want to do first before just, getting that first supplement out there. So have kind of a different timelines and approaches here. It is, of course, up to the PHA how quickly or slowly you want to move through the steps, but we just ask you to be intentional in thinking about it and making sure that you're making the decisions that are best for your agency. Next slide. And here we've tried to, out of this 2-hour webinar, we've tried to condense all of the 6 steps into like a quick, handy guide for you. So you can feel free to maybe print this out and make this a checklist that you put on your whiteboard or something like that. This is all of the steps kind of condensed into one at a glance sheet. So this you can use as a reference of, where am I in the process? What have I yet to do? If you need to communicate to your board or any other kind of executive committees on what's happening and when, this is a good way to do it. So you refer them to the 2-hour webinar. So you can use this. We hope that it's helpful for you. But it's just, I'm not going to go through the specifics because it's just everything that we have talked about today and that you'll learn more about in the future webinars. And with that, I think that wraps us up to our last question and answer session.
Yes, thank you so much. We have covered a ton of information today during the session. I know we've been answering questions throughout, but please continue to answer your continue to ask your questions in the chat, or go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll call you up one by one so that you can ask your questions verbally. We really want to make sure that we do answer all of your questions, that you have a solid understanding of what's coming up next, which is step 1, and then also a good understanding of the other steps. As I said before, we are going to dive a little deeper into steps 2 through 6 in subsequent webinars, but want to make sure that we answer all questions today. So I don't see any questions in the chat right now or any hands raised, so I'm just going to give it a minute and see give everybody an opportunity to get those questions in. Or just raise your hands or come off mute and we'll hear from you that way.
Hi, this is Shannon Bonacci. I have a question. This might be something that you guys address further down the line in training, but for some of the agencies that have been moved to work previously, I'm just wondering if there's like a grandfathering period that any typically use for when they start implementing, like for instance, a work requirement or things like that, or I'm just kind of curious because we obviously don't want to change everything overnight and mandate it for everyone across the board. So I would love to hear some more information on that piece.
Sure, I can take that one. So I think the question is like if you're going to be implementing an activity that has a high impact on residents, like what's the best way to roll that out? Kind of, is that the question?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, on work requirements specifically, we actually just had a report that came out from our partners in policy development and research. It's not a kind of rigorous research study, but it provides case studies of some of the MTW agencies who have done work requirements and some of the things that they have learned in the implementing or thinking about implementing a work requirement. So we'll make sure that you guys that report it was just published, so it will be on our website shortly. It has so hot off the presses it hasn't even made it there yet, but that would be a good research source for work requirements specifically. On just the general question of implementation timelines, I think that's really a decision to make with your stakeholders. So through the public process, you have the opportunity to meet with folks and to discuss how implementation might work best. So I would just encourage you to kind of talk with folks there. We've had agencies that have done any kind of number of things to get to the implementation process. So I don't think we have like this is the right way to do it. But yeah, definitely looking at that. The work requirements report that's going to come out might be helpful for you, and just encourage you to engage and talk things through about what would be best for your agency.
Thank you, Allison. We have a hand raised. Deborah, are you able to unmute yourself?
I believe so.
All right.
Okay. Because we are sort of the second round of a cohort that has the same overarching goal of administrative efficiencies, is there somewhere, I know you that we can see what sort of unique waivers some of the other cohort members have done and how successful they've been? I mean, I know you collect these and you might have you kind of mentioned it, but I don't know if there's like one database that we can see of all the waiver options or waivers that have worked or waivers that haven't worked.
Sure. So like we kind of like worked and not worked, we kind of stay away from that because it kind of depends on what your local situation is. And that's the great thing about MTW is just being able to have tools that can work in your community. For the first cohort, they are kind of a little bit further down the road. So we do have some research reports that have been published for them. They're on kind of an annual cycle where the evaluator looks at what they're doing and then publishes a report on that in the following year. So I think we are published the baseline and year one reports, and year two I think should be coming out soon. So you can take a look at those reports are also on our website. And it's really just, it doesn't necessarily say what's like working best or not, but it says what the agencies were thinking about when they entered the program, the goals that they had and that they were trying to accomplish, and then what MTW flexibilities they use to try and meet those goals and kind of how they feel that it's going. So it's more kind of driven from the agency experience, but it does have some data in there as well, and you can kind of get a sense of what the other PHAs are doing.
Okay, sorry, and did you say where we could find those?
That's just on the MTW website, so HUD.gov/MTW, and we have a research section which will have those reports, and you can find the work requirements report there too soon, not right now, but it will be posted soon.
Okay, thank you so much. We have another question that's come in through the chat. At what point do we start reporting in the MTW fields in VMS, in the voucher management system?
Yes, this is a great question, and we will definitely cover this in a lot more detail in the finance webinar in the first one. But essentially, after you execute your MTW ACC amendment, it'll be the first full month at your MTW. So let's say you executed your ACC HUD counter slides on, let's see, what's today, April 11th. So your first full month of reporting as an MTW agency is going to be for May of 2024. So you'll want to start using those fields then. I think that we'll go into a lot more detail though when we have this webinar.
Great. All right. Oh, looks like we have another question. Looks like a number of waivers require an impact analysis as well. Are there examples of those somewhere or standardized forms for them we will be required to use?
I can take that one also. And also, I just dropped the link to our research page on the MTW website in the chat for those prior questions. So the impact analysis, there's guidance in the MTW operations notice that tells you kind of the elements that are required to look at as a part of the impact analysis. We also have all of the MTW plans and supplements that other agencies have submitted. So you can look at other kind of versions of documents for that other agencies have submitted. So that's a resource for you. Would also encourage you to reach out to your field office if you're having trouble working through an impact analysis on how to do that, and they can loop in the desk officer if necessary. The desk officers have experience on the impact analysis and hardship policies and can help you with any questions that you might have as a part of that. Again, you'll hear this a lot as we talk about MTW, but a lot of time we don't provide a lot of standard formats for things because it's really so unique to the agency how they go about completing that impact analysis that we don't have a standard format for that, but there are many examples that you can look at. All of the plans, MTW plans for the initial agencies and MTW supplements for the expansion agencies are all posted on our website, so you can browse through some of those if you're interested.
Thank you so much. All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat or hands raised at this time. So we will move forward, just a couple more slides. If you do have any questions as I'm going through this, please feel free to raise your hand or put those questions into the chat. We definitely want to make sure we circle back to those. So at this time, I want to go through a few resources that are available to you, and they're on the slide that you should have received the slide deck. So the first is the Moving to Work Operations Notice. This has a ton of really great relevant information and is kind of something that you'll want to definitely bookmark, know where it is, refer to it often throughout your program build up and implementation. This is the Moving to Work HUD.gov site. And as Allison was saying a little while ago, here's the research and evaluation page. That will take you here, and that's where you can get the information, Deborah, that you were asking about as far as what other MTW flexibility agencies have done in the past. All right, here is the Moving to Work expansion page on the HUD Exchange. There's a lot of really great information here as well, and this will also take you back to the HUD.gov page, as well as to the next item that I'm going to bring up here, the Welcome to MTW Expansion Training. This training, we hope, will be extremely useful. We think that others have found it really useful in the past. So another one I would suggest that you bookmark along with that operations notice is the MTW expansion training. This has a lot of great information as you're going through all of the steps and will be very useful to you, hopefully. All right, and the last page that I want to show here is the Moving to Work Expansion webinar series. This is where we kind of keep all of the cohort onboarding sessions, and they are in order, kind of starting from the bottom being cohort 1, and then on up. The asset building cohort was cohort 4, and you are cohort 5. So this is where, for example, this today's session will live. In a few weeks, we'll have this posted here under a new subheading up here, along with the recording, the slides, and the transcript of today's session. So if you ever need to refer back to one of our sessions, this is where you'll find it here. All right. Going back, I don't see any questions, any additional questions in the chat. If you could go to the next slide. All right. Upcoming onboarding webinars. I know we kind of mentioned these today throughout the session, but we have MTW funding flexibility, which is kind of focused on that financial reporting. That's part 1 of the financial series, and that will be on May 9th. All of these are from 2 to 4. MTW funding flexibilities, kind of going over those policies and procedures, will be on May 30th. MTW supplement to the PHA plan, MTW waivers, and public process. We're going to go through that on June 27th. How to submit your MTW supplement. Your first MTW supplement will be on July 25th. We're going to have office hours on August 22nd, so you can come and bring all of your questions, and we'll have a panel there to answer those. That will be on August 22nd, and then that MTW 50058 expansion form changes webinar will be on September 19th. And hopefully by then we'll have a little bit more information about transferring that MTW expansion form data into HIP, and we'll provide that at that time as well. So, okay, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, I think we might give you a little bit of time back in your day. I don't see any hands raised or any other questions in the chat. So thank you all for coming today. Please be sure, if you have any questions in the meantime about today's webinar content or other questions, please feel free to email the HUD MTW flexibility 2, no spaces, MTW flexibility 2 HUD.gov box. And we thank you so much. Everybody have a great day.